It was never shown to cameras, not mentioned in any Kremlin itinerary. But long before Captain Ibrahim Traoré's plane landed in Moscow for the May 9th Victory Day, something had already been prepared, quietly, meticulously, and by order of one man alone, Vladimir Putin. A private chamber within the eastern wing of the Kremlin, rarely used and rarely spoken of, was reopened, renovated, and renamed. Not for diplomats, not for oligarchs, but for one guest, the man who stood up. Kremlin staff called it Komnata 27, Room 27. To outsiders, it meant nothing. But to those who understood Russian military folklore, 27 was the regiment number of Putin's father, who fought during the siege of Leningrad. And this room, it turned out, had once been his father's field operations archive, turned into a symbolic war study, then sealed for decades. Putin had it restored in secret, not as a hotel suite, but as an altar of shared struggle. When Traoré entered the room, he paused. Not because it was luxurious, it wasn't. The walls were stone, the windows narrow, but everything inside spoke to survival. A thick red rug stitched with thread from a pre-Soviet textile mill. A wooden table scorched at the edge, left unpolished, preserved with the initials, VSP 1944. A bookshelf lined with war diaries, but one title placed face up, We Die Standing. On the desk, a fountain pen, still inked, used by Putin's father to write letters to his unit. But the most striking object sat alone under a glass dome, a cracked army boot. The label read simply, worn to the last step. Traoré stood for minutes before touching anything. He didn't sit, he just looked. And when he finally did sit, he pulled out a notebook and wrote one sentence. Legacy is heavier than bullets. Later, an aide asked Putin why he gave Traoré that room. He replied without hesitation, because he is the only one I've met in years who would have walked through this war and not asked for shelter. The room was not built for comfort. It was built for the weight of memory. And now, it belongs to two men, from two continents, linked not by treaties, but by resistance. And while the world watched tanks roll and leaders pose, the real alliance was born in silence, between stone walls under the gaze of history itself. No one was allowed inside once the doors closed. Not the guards, not the translators, not even the Kremlin aide who had personally brought Captain Ibrahim Traoré to room 27. For 4 hours, the room remained sealed, its narrow windows casting long shadows across the stone floor as the sun shifted outside. And when the door finally opened, the aide standing guard noticed something strange. The air felt heavier. Not like smoke, not like incense, like memory. Traoré stepped out slowly, his expression unreadable. He said nothing, just gave a slight nod and left. It wasn't until later, after his departure, that someone finally entered to clean and reset the room. But when they did, they noticed something had changed. The boot beneath the glass dome had been moved slightly, not by accident, but as if repositioned with care. And beneath it, a slip of handmade parchment had been tucked under the base. It bore no signature, only 9 handwritten words in French. Même pieds nus, l'Afrique continuera à marcher seule. Even barefoot, Africa will keep walking alone. The Kremlin archivist who discovered it froze. No cameras, no press, no social media post, just a note. Placed not for the world, but for time. It was later quietly agreed the note would not be removed. A small plaque now accompanies it, unannounced to the public. No guide in the Kremlin tour mentions room 27, but those who serve inside know. It is no longer just Putin's father's war room. It is now shared. 2 names, 2 stories, 2 rebellions, joined across generations. And somewhere in Ouagadougou, on the desk of a soldier president, rests an identical glass dome. Inside it, a dried leaf from a Russian birch tree, picked by Traoré himself before he left Moscow. No label, no inscription, just a leaf, a memory, a silent vow. We do not borrow history anymore, we write it. They had eyes on everything, almost. From the moment Captain Ibrahim Traoré landed in Moscow to the minute he stepped onto Red Square, Western intelligence agencies watched through satellites, security feeds, informants, and AI-driven surveillance. Every handshake, every salute, every movement was cataloged. Except one, room 27. The feed went dark. Kremlin protocol had pulled the plug manually, something that hadn't happened since the Cold War. For 4 hours, Traoré disappeared. No signal, no voice pickup, no temperature shift, and when he emerged, the Russians said nothing. Traoré said nothing. But the look on his face, that terrified them. Within 48 hours, NATO convened a closed-door intelligence fusion task force. The objective, to assess symbolic asset transfer events, or SATEs, a new term coined inside Langley specifically for what happened in Room 27. Was it a weapons deal? A war map? A treaty not meant to be written? Or worse, a legacy handoff? MI6 speculated that Putin had given Traoré more than political backing. This wasn't just a visit, one UK intelligence officer was quoted saying. It looked like succession. Meanwhile, the CIA ran facial analysis comparing Traoré's demeanor pre- and post-meeting. The result? A measurable drop in blink rate, heart rate, and muscle tension. Signs of psychological anchoring, they called it. Traoré had left the room more resolved than when he entered. More sovereign. France, in particular, panicked. A declassified internal memo from Paris's DGSE warned of a potential irreversible shift in African loyalty vectors. In other words, if Traoré received something symbolic enough, powerful enough, it could ripple far beyond Burkina Faso. One French diplomat said it plainly. The danger isn't what Putin gave him. It's that Traoré now walks as if he's already won. Rumors spread that the compass Putin gave Traoré wasn't the only gift. That blueprints were exchanged, that coded documents were passed, that maybe, just maybe, a promise was made to protect Burkina Faso not only with weapons, but with the full Russian security apparatus. A nuclear umbrella, some whispered, a training base in the Sahel, a new axis. But none of these rumors were confirmed. That was the most unsettling part. Room 27 offered nothing but silence. And that silence screamed louder than any broadcast. Meanwhile, in Washington, one analyst stared at the leaked photo of Putin's embrace and muttered, "We didn't lose a country, we lost the narrative." Because from that moment on, no sanction, no statement, no counter-narrative could erase what had been felt worldwide. Traoré had entered a room and exited a myth. Weeks passed, reports piled up, but answers didn't. Inside Langley, one analyst quietly closed the final file marked Traoré, Room 27, slid it back into the drawer and locked it, then added a note above it. "We don't need proof. We already lost." The EU issued no official statement. NATO shifted its attention elsewhere. And in Paris, someone finally admitted behind closed doors, it wasn't a room, it was a ceremony. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing a man can carry out of a locked chamber is not a weapon, not a document, not even a deal. It's conviction. And that's what Ibrahim Traoré walked away with. Conviction that needed no translation, no confirmation. The kind that can't be sanctioned, censored, or erased. He never spoke of the room again. And he never needed to. Because ever since, when he stands on podiums, when he looks down a camera lens, when he walks among his people, there's something else behind his eyes. Something that makes even the most powerful tremble. He knows what was said, and they never will.